Good evening. Thank you all for coming. My name is Paul Hardart. I'm the professor here at the New School. I also oversee the media management program. So the media studies program here at the New School is the oldest and one of the largest in the country. It's about 600 students, and it's a graduate program. And I encourage you, if you're interested, to take a look at our website and look at our program. We have a nice affiliation with the PGA, and tonight the panel is on the greening of new media. The New School has just, in the last 2 years, set up a sustainability office and has committed to reducing its carbon footprint. And again, if you're interested in that, we have it on our website as well. But without sort of going into too much detail there, I want to introduce Chris from the PGA, and I hope you have a good evening talking about the greening of new media. Here's Chris.
Thanks to Paul. And thanks to the New School, this is the 7th year that the PGA New Media Council East has produced events with the New School Media Studies group, and we're very proud of that. The first year, we were actually part of their curriculum. And if you have a friend who couldn't make it tonight, this event, as you can see, is being recorded. Actually, we have a multi-camera shoot tonight. Hooray. One of our own members of the PGA NMC East Executive Committee, Jenny Bourne, is house left shooting. And we also have Terry Golub in the back, who's with really useful media, which is aligned with the New School. So this should be posted within a few weeks at scribemedia.org/PGA, and will also be pushed through the New School site. So we will have an event sort of rounding out our year. I'm just going to do some housekeeping before I get to further introductions. Probably 3 weeks from tonight, at the 57th Street Screening Room on apps. Basically a look at producing apps, particularly smartphone and tablet, and we have some great people from Hearst and Gilt Group and also CNN Money who are going to present, and that'll be a fun event. This event, as Paul had mentioned, and as you saw in your the information through Eventbrite, is the first time that we and the New Media Council have produced an event with PGA Green. Katie Carpenter, who's moderating this panel, is one of the founders of that organization. We're very, very proud of that. It started here in New York about 4 years ago, and it's significant for a number of reasons. The PGA Green is the first group within an entertainment guild to actually codify the standards for green production and post-production. And they've created an amazing compendium of vendors and tips on how to green your production, how to reduce, of course, your carbon footprint, and have won awards as well, and got the folks in LA with the Producers Guild to really put together an excellent site. And it's really turned a lot of heads in the industry. Katie Carpenter, as I said, is part of that. We did do an event a couple of years ago. Sadly, that's the only webcast that seems to be missing. Hopefully, like the Dead Sea Scrolls, it may show up someday. But Laura Michelchishin, who started Planet Green, was interviewed by our own Kendall Allen. So we've been wanting to do this particular event for a little while, and so you learn a lot tonight. One of our partners, as Paul had mentioned, is the New School Sustainability Program. And one of their partners is going to speak in just a minute, and that's the Fourth Bin. As you may have seen on your seats, they are recycling electronics, and you will see an orange bin in the back. So please, if you have anything, whether it's batteries or you had enough time to remember to bring something to recycle, I probably have something in my hideous computer bag that I should have gotten rid of a year ago, so I'll look through that. But that's another part of tonight's program. So I'm just going to introduce Angela Franco from the Fourth Bin, who will give you a few words in a second, and then she'll introduce Katie Carpenter. And the way it's going to work is we have 3 panelists who will present some of their work, and then Katie will run through a panel discussion, and then we will take your questions as well. And I think, Joe, is that right? We have 2 live mics in the back. So if you'd be so kind as to wait until a mic comes around. We know you might urgently need to blurt out your question, but we do have people here to help with that. Again, thank you very much for coming on a slightly drizzly Monday holiday week night. Without further ado, again, Angela Franco, the Director of Marketing for The Fourth Bin. Thanks again.
Thank you. And I want to especially thank Cindy Pound for inviting us here. And I want to declare that I don't always dress like Halloween. Orange is the new green. Orange is the brand in e-waste collection. What we do is we follow E-Stewart standards, and we have door-to-door pickup service with no minimums. So if you have 1 computer, 20 computers, 50 computers, we will come door to door to business and residents. These cards that I put on your seats really show in a funny and drastic way what can happen to next generations if we don't stop and think about what happens to e-waste. There's lead, there's cadmium, there are all of these toxic substances in a PC that when they're left into the landfill, it pollutes the environment. So we're about just changing things a little bit at a time, letting you be aware of the fourth bin of e-waste collection. We have our facilities manager, Ari, back there, also in another orange shirt. And if you have any questions, just ask him about it. And pass this along. If you don't have any e-waste tonight, don't worry, we come door to door. And look on our website, www.fourthbin.com, and you'll see some blogs and the reason why we chose orange and about regulation and legislation on e-waste. Thank you very much.
As Steve Jobs once said, one more thing. This wine I'm holding in my hand is from our wine sponsor, Terra Fossil Wine, which is based right here in New York. Terra Fossil has been working with us for about 15 months now. They have some excellent New Zealand, Argentinian Malbecs. We're favored tonight with a New Zealand Pinot Noir and I believe a New Zealand Chard. They are a sustainable wine grower, vintner. So it was particularly interesting for us to do this event and have them provide the wine. If you like this and you like what they're about, go to terrafossil.com. You can work out a deal. You can talk to us. And, of course, if you're interested in joining the PGA, please talk to me or Cindy or Marco Albrecht or any of our other members here. Now, without further ado, Katie Carpenter.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Cindy and Angela and Paul for hosting us. I'm very excited to be here, actually. We haven't had a co-production between the New Media Committee and the Green Committee in a while, and I think the time has come. I'm really a crossover person here. I'm a visitor from the world of television. I've had some new media experience, but most of my experience is in green. I was the co-chair of the PGA Green Committee when we first got started, and we did, over the course of a couple of years, collaborate with a few studios and networks and actually write the standards, which 5 of the studios in LA are now using in their associated networks: Universal, Warner, Sony, Fox, and Disney. So I should give them a shout out to that. They really supported our effort. And they helped us produce the website, which is the home for all our tools. It's called greenproductionguide.com. And I hope you'll Google your way to that over the course of your future productions and see what you can do. It offers a carbon calculator that you can use, specifically designed for film and television productions. It offers a set of green guidelines which allow you to reduce the carbon emissions and other environmental impacts of your shows and your new media pieces and your films. And then the vendor guide is really the most impressive piece of it. These are green vendors which have been recommended by other producers who've worked with them on other productions over the last 3 years. They help those productions reduce their environmental impacts, and the green vendors in turn are placed up on the website so you can search for them, whether you're shooting in New York or North Carolina or California or Alaska, wherever you may be. There's green vendors for you up on that green vendor directory. So the thing I need to do before we get started is, and I'll tell you, I'm not going to invite the panelists to sit up here. I don't want you to think this is like an empty panel. We are going to let them sit in their seats until the presentations, the initial presentations have occurred, so they don't have to crane their necks backwards to look at the show. But what I wanted to say is the green production guidelines, when we first wrote them, were, you know, they filled a book and we still printed them on paper. We don't do that anymore for obvious reasons, and we have them on a website. But we still use the same basic green methodologies, and they fall, the things that can save you trouble in the environment with your production, which work for new media as well as they do for film and TV, are the same wherever you go. Travel and transportation, set design and construction when you use it, energy and electric, of course, what's in the tank, kitchen, water, craft and catering, and then waste and recycling, of course, a big part of that. And if you're mindful, if you're using these guidelines, you're using these vendors, and you're calculating your carbon footprint, if you're watching carefully, you can reduce your carbon footprint by half of what the first show we worked on dropped their carbon footprint down from 2,000, the estimate they were going to have 2,000 metric tons of carbon, dropped it down to 975. And that same producer, Mary Jo, actually just came in with a carbon footprint on her latest movie, which had a lot of stunts, cars flying through the air, the whole thing, 500 metric tons of carbon, just below that. So there's a lot you can do. And one thing I wanted to say is that we have periodically forgotten why we do this. And it just so happens that today, the IPCC, well, actually, I think the report was released a couple days ago, but it hit the news and the blogs today. The IPCC, that's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the group that won the Nobel Peace Prize with Gore a couple of years ago. They've come out with a new report just in the last few days. It's been filtered through the various websites. And here are the three things that the scientists have been able to confirm now with data beyond a shadow of doubt. Extreme weather is on the rise. Maybe you didn't believe it before, but it's certainly true now. Climate disasters are both deadly and expensive. They put the numbers for the cost of these climate disasters now in the report. And greenhouse gas pollution is indubitably driving these trends. For the IPCC to say that is incredible. They were reluctant to say that over the last couple of years, and that's why deniers managed to survive. So their big resolution is there is hope. There are adaptations we can undertake to improve our resilience, and there are solutions. And what's great is film, television, and new media are actually undertaking some of those efforts. This is an industry that has really come out, and there's more we can do. Film, I would say, is doing a lot. More than 50% of the film industry is working on this. Television, not so much. We have a little ways to go still. We have some networks on board and some other networks that have felt for one reason or another it's too expensive. But new media, I think, can be a real leader in this area. And tonight we have with us panelists who work in three different areas, quite different areas of new media. We have someone who specializes in green hosting, but he does everything else too. We have somebody who specializes in webisode production, but he does everything else too. And we have a digital artist who is finding really interesting alternative avenues of getting green messaging into the atmosphere without coming down too hard on it either way. So I think it's best at this point to introduce our panelists, and I'm going to introduce them one by one, but I'll give you a sense of what's coming. Matt Rosenberg, you know, when I tried to do some research on Matt's work, I found it was very interesting. There are a lot of claims that are made on the web, but Matt is one of the few people who actually delivers on those claims in terms of green hosting and green messaging. So he's going to talk to us about a variety of his businesses. He's described as a techno-evangelist and an environmental activist. Can you put all four of those together? I think that's a pretty cool moniker. He's a partner in Black Hat Hosting and the founder of Urban Eden Technology Consulting. He has prominent IT clients, including Annie Leibovitz, Mario Batali, Meryl Streep, and many others. And with his wife, he runs two projects, Eating Liberally and well, you know what? I'm going to let you tell us all about that. How about that? And I'll come up to introduce the others once Matt is done. Let's welcome Matt Rosenberg.
Okay, so what I'm going to talk about today is not all of those things, but essentially trying to make people aware of what's behind social media, which is the internet, because it doesn't work without it. So what is the carbon footprint of the internet? How can you maybe reduce it, or maybe you really can't? I mean, that's a decision you have to make once you sort of learn more about it and learn what the carbon that you're actually producing actually is. What I'm not going to talk about is, getting a solar charger for your iPhone, or making sure you unplug the charger because of vampire power. I mean, those are all kind of obvious things I think that everyone has probably heard about at some point before. So this is a little chart, kind of silly. I broke it up into 3 charts. This is the first one. This is done by a website called Create and Share, and they call themselves a collective of young people who share the certainty for that a better world is possible. Some of the things on this chart, basically the thing to take away from it, I think, is that in 2005, for example, the data centers in the US alone used as much power as you would use in the United Kingdom in 2 months in a year. So the data centers that are behind social media are really consuming energy, and it's not something that we should necessarily ignore. This is the good side of it, which is the second part of why I guess these people think that we have a better future. Obviously, the data centers are going to reduce the amount of people that are traveling. They're going to reduce CO2s for people who don't have to go to work. You can see that 40% of people can actually work at home or do other things. So you have a lot of other benefits from using social media, using the internet, using email, as opposed to obviously going to work and having to physically travel there. So let's just go through some of these silly charts. First, this is the last one of their 3. Gives you a little sort of some numbers which I'm not exactly sure are that relevant, because 15,000 searches for funny cat pictures equaling a cheeseburger. I don't know how much energy a cheeseburger takes to make, but I do know that 5,100 searches for nilbog, which is goblin backwards, using up enough energy to run a dish. Actually, this one is, sorry. We have a dishwasher for 5,400 years. But anyway, those are silly things I just want to get past. Now, the real numbers, though, takeaway from this is that the IT sector, which includes pretty much all of the servers, all of the computers, everything that's online, actually, there's one study that recently came out that it's about 2% of global greenhouse gases are being emitted by the IT industry. So that's the production, that's the servers, that's everything. Now this chart, which was generated, shows how much electricity in sales. So back in 2005, when this was generated, you have 1.2% of total electrical sales in the United States are actually for servers. So something to think about. Now, there are people working on this. We're going to get to that in a moment. The other bad side of this, and this is what Greenpeace calls, this is an example of it, North Carolina's dirty data triangle. And this is where poor choices are made in the name of economic development. And here, what we see is basically the short-term lure of low-cost dirty energy and tax incentives are being used to basically pull companies in this case, North Carolina, which I'm going to go into detail about this because actually the centers that have just located into this data triangle include Apple, Google, and Facebook. And they are getting these enormous tax abatements. This is actually, if any one of you have heard of iCloud, the basic iCloud data center is in North Carolina, and they got major tax incentives. And the problem with North Carolina, just let you see a little bit more about the kind of incentives they're getting. The problem with North Carolina is basically the energy produced there is among the worst in the country. You're basically getting very little of the energy from any kind of renewable resource, essentially only 4% of it. So these large data centers, which are basically being given these incredible tax incentives in North Carolina, are basically using coal, nuclear, everything. Nuclear is probably better than some of the other stuff in terms of greenhouse gases. So something to think about. That's not obviously all of Google or all of Facebook or even all of Apple, but these are three major data centers that are actually, the one in case of Apple is actually their newest and biggest data center, which was put online just for iCloud. So basically, there are better ways of doing this for people. Some people it doesn't work for, but we'll just go into that. So there are some alternatives. I'm going to go over. These are some small green hosts. The problem with a lot of these green hosts is you'll see, if you look at the link at the bottom, you'll see there's a link to the EPA, which has Green Power Partners. This will show you actually what percentage of their energy is third-party. These are all done, with, I should say, with carbon offsets, which I have issues with, but they're third-party verified carbon offsets. So if you're satisfied with carbon offsets, then these companies are some hosting companies you could use. I would point out also that a lot of people don't realize that actually Google has been a carbon neutral company since 2007, since they buy carbon offsets to offset anything they use. So you could put Google on this list too. It doesn't mean they're not producing a lot of dirty energy. They're not using a lot of dirty energy. It just means that they're buying a lot of carbon offsets. When you're looking at these, there's also a lot of green certifications. You'll see these Greenie, CO2 neutral. There's the Green Power Partners. Again, I'll put the link up there because actually I think the EPA Green Power Partners is one of the more relevant ones that'll actually show you what's going on. Now, these are what I would consider, the previous ones are kind of like pseudo-green because they are just buying carbon offsets, and I'm not, even though some of these companies like Green Geeks, they recycle all of their food, they do every conceivable thing at the office, anything you can imagine. There are some other companies which are actually better. And these what I would call the seriously green hosts. AISO.net is, for the last 14 years, has their own solar array. They're completely off the grid. They're in California, and every server is 100% powered by their own solar array. Recently, I'm just going to go to the cloud system on the right. Green Cloud with a Q actually came on in July, and they're in Iceland, and they take advantage of the geothermal advantage they have. So they're 100% geothermal powered, and they're right outside of Reykjavik. It's a great company, and they're very reasonable fees for hosting. They also do major sort of cloud services. The issue, though, about all of these companies are, when I talk to clients about whether they should use a green host or what they should do, the biggest issue they're really concerned about is stability, that it's always going to be online, and also they're concerned that basically security is paramount to many of them. So all of these companies certify all sorts of security, ISO, this and that, and not worth going into all the different standards because they change anyway. But they're not necessarily, I can't say for sure that they can guarantee the security maybe as much as some of the features that Google hosted mail is. And because they don't have, for example, something that a lot of people don't use on Google, but I'd recommend everyone does if they have Gmail. But you can also, there's also something called hosted Google or Google Apps, which we're really talking about for companies. But Google has something called two-part authentication. This is not a green issue, but basically it means that you're not just using your username and password, you're using another form of ID. In the case of Google two-part authentication, you download an app on your iPhone or your BlackBerry, and if any of you have ever banked commercially and you get a little RSA key with a number that changes every 30 seconds, that's what it does on your iPhone or your BlackBerry. So if someone has your name and password, they also need your 6-digit code that changes every 30 seconds. And Google implemented that after they were hacked from China, and they basically put that up in the last year. It was, I think, one of their ways of kind of dealing with that. So in thinking about, though, hosting with Google or any of these sites, The technology used is also, well, go into the technology basically is a cloud. And what is a cloud? A cloud, if you take the physical side of it, I like to call it something along the lines of collaborative consumption. And collaborative consumption is a fairly new term. It was actually coined by a woman named Rachel Botson. She authored a book, What's Mine is Yours, The Rise of Collaborative Consumption. And it charts how the 20th century represented hyperconsumption, where we were defined by credit, advertising, and what we owned. And now in the 21st century, we have collaborative consumption, where we're defined by reputation and community. And that really goes into social and cloud hosting, actually. It's a technological, I think you can use it as a technological term as well, because basically, when you have cloud, this is actually from the Current New Yorker, I thought it was kind of good for this moment. With cloud computing, you are actually I should say that some people don't know what a cloud is, and I just show you, these are things that everyone here probably uses. They're all in a cloud. They're all cloud computing. And why cloud computing is good in terms of using less CO2 is that it's incredibly efficient. So if we look at collaborative consumption, the cloud advantage, this graphic actually comes from Google environmental blog, internal Google environmental blog, and it's showing how Gmail, at the top, you'll see you have a regular company with their own server, and you'll see the efficiency on that server is not very high. You'll have less servers if you have the same number of companies hosted on Gmail or hosted Gmail, which is Google Apps. And that's just showing you, obviously, if those servers are more efficient, they're going to use less power, pretty much. This illustration pretty much is the same thing. Small office, you see how many watts small office uses if they're using Gmail or if they're not using Gmail. Pretty much the same thing. Problem is the industry really lacks transparency, and that is for several reasons. They're really proprietary. I actually contacted someone I know at Google, who's a family member, yesterday to get some information on their greening, and basically, not only do they not, I'm sorry, Twitter. I said Google, and I meant Twitter. I'm being corrected by my wife. I meant Twitter, and actually, Google's actually more transparent than Twitter. Twitter's really not transparent. Twitter won't even say where their servers are. They won't publicly say where they're located. There's obviously blogs that point out where they probably are, but so they don't really talk about anything to do with green. So this sort of lack of transparency, they basically use a form of measurement for server farms called PUE, which is power usage effectiveness. And this speaks only really to the efficiency of the data center, and it's relative to the energy consumed by the data center. So it doesn't tell you the overall resource impact at all, because it's like, well, Google's really efficient in using this electricity. Well, but how much carbon are you burning? Anyway, it's a bad way of doing it. And actually, there is a better way, and it's been proposed, and it's a carbon usage effectiveness. So it really gives you a metric of how much carbon you're burning when you're running your servers, how much carbon you're releasing. So this is something actually that Greenpeace proposed in their report about server data farms around the country. They did a report 2 years ago. Another thing to think about, this is the second part of servers, is that data really is, this is someone from Microsoft said this, data is really a processed form of electricity. So data is energy. We have to think of it that way, because the more data you store, the more energy you're going to use. Now, I'm going to wrap up really soon because I'm supposed to do this 10 minutes, so I'm up to 12 minutes. There are other things that happen in a data center that people don't think about. I've just gone over some of the obvious things, running servers and how much power they use. I haven't gone into all, obviously, in running a server, there's cooling and there's all sorts of mitigation of air, of how they're going to cool it. They use ocean. Google actually is very good about the way they cool their data centers. And Microsoft did an experiment, which everyone has taken on, which is raising the temperature of server farms. They found that they can actually run servers at 80 degrees. They don't need to be air-conditioned cooler than 80 degrees. These are all factors that will sort of lower the electrical usage of a server. Now, side issue, though, that was tangentially went to energy usage, is that there are other things that you don't realize. And one of those things is that basically you have to keep in mind that anytime you put anything on the internet, it's practically never deleted. So if data is energy, you have to think about data retention also. And this is kind of a scary memo which was leaked to Wired a few months back, which shows you just the data retention from the Justice Department for various cell phone carriers. So this is a chart that, infographic that Wired did on it. I broke it up so it could fit on the screen. So you can see, for example, that the location you're using your phone at, and that's the cell tower information, is stored in the case the top chart. AT&T will store that for 3+ years. So they can go back to 3+ years to find exactly where your phone was at that moment. Aside from the scary parts of this, that's actually a lot of data. And I'm only talking about cell phones. Google will not say how long they hold your email after you've deleted it. Some people theorize it's 20 years. Some people say it's 5 years. There's no definitive. I've asked people I know in law enforcement, and they've just said, I've subpoenaed stuff going back 2 years, but they haven't needed more than that based on the subpoena. So there is something to keep in mind, that all of that data being stored, and I'm not even talking about YouTube, because when you delete a video on YouTube, that's also being stored and back up. And there's different ways they store it. They may store it for a certain amount of time is going to be actually on a hard drive. And hard drives and servers, if you didn't realize, are very much like the hard drives that you have at home. They're faster, they have more storage on them, but they're basically really similar. In fact, all of the flooding due to climate change in Taiwan has made a big problem for hard drive manufacturers, which not only has affected consumers. If you go right now and try to order 5 hard drives from B&H, they will not ship them to you. You're going to have to go there in person because there's such a shortage of hard drives nationwide. 50 million hard drives a month have been reduced. The reason I bring that up is those same hard drive reductions are actually hurting the expansion of many data centers because they use from the same production. But what I was saying that is that first your data is stored on those hard drives, which are running all the time and obviously using electricity. Then they're eventually transferred to LTO5 tapes, which are very, very high capacity tapes, compressed and encrypted in little squares. You may have seen them at a business. Actually, they're going to LTO6, which is a higher compression. Essentially, even those tapes, though, have embedded energy and everything because they made energy to produce them, and there's energy to store them in a safe place so they're not getting too hot or not too cold because they can degrade. They're literally like a cassette tape, only a little fancier. So all that storage is another form of energy. Last, just a little funniness, this is carbon footprint of a tweet. This was computed by this nice Twitter engineer, Rafi. I actually tweeted with him yesterday to see if this figure was still correct because he came up with this in about 18 months ago, and he tweeted back that he has not come up with a better number. So we don't know. We know that Twitter did change data centers since this calculation was done, so this could be less energy now. And if any of you want to compute your own Twitter energy, there's a website this person did based on Rafi's calculations. I put in my @MattyRosen's Twitter address, 3,074 tweets, and then it came up with, it does all that for you. I just put on the screen what it is. So, you know, the equivalent of all my tweets is to move an Audi A4 0.37 kilometers, which is, so you can go to that website and you can put in your Twitter name and find how much energy you've consumed. And finally, not to use paper. I do believe in QR codes, so if you have a QR scanner, you want to contact me, you can scan the QR code, and that would be it.
Thank you so much. Are you going to leave that computer?
There's someone, each one has their own.
Oh, no kidding. That's great. Oh, my God, Matt, that was incredible. Thank you. I have a lot of questions for you for after. We'll save them. But I would like to know if the number of Twitter messages that's occurring per day, I mean, it's only growing, right? I mean, it's... and. Oh, so, oh my God. So that number is going to be, you know, astronomical by next year. Okay. So our incessant need to communicate via Twitter and our other means, we're going to have to come up with some other low carbon ways of doing that?
You know, that's a decision people have to make.
How much carbon do I emit just by talking? At least a tweet's worth. Okay. Well, that was incredible. I look forward to talking with you afterwards on the panel. Next, we have Chris Perera, who is going to be joining us, and Chris has done so many things quite different. Now, you've heard a sort of hosting and hardware and data center view of the world. Now you're going to hear a more new media production-oriented view of the world. Chris is an independent producer and a web producer. He produces long-form as well as PSAs and spots for groups like NRDC. And I did a little research on this NRDC website, especially Switchboard, is very highly rated. It's in the top 5 environmental websites online up there. GRIS, TreeHugger.Earth, and Real Climate are the only ones that beat it. And if you're interested in seeing some incredible, impressive environmental videos on the web, NRDC and its host of websites, I think they have 5 or 6 different websites, offer some really powerful messaging in different lengths, short, medium, and long. But Chris also does documentaries. He's done news. He's done reality TV for Discovery, for ABC, for TLC, even for the BBC and New York Times TV and independent film. He's got a wide range of experience, but his environmental passion guides him in his short-form work mostly. He's a former TV reporter, and he does investigative pieces and is currently working on a series which has him doing a behind-the-scenes look at the work of Aaron Brockovich for Discovery. So there's another environmental crusader. So that's complicated because he's a green producer. He's producing environmental programming for short and long form. He has a lot to tell us. Why don't you come on up, Chris Perera.
All right. Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Matt. That was a great presentation, and I certainly learned a lot. And I'm looking forward to the Q&A as well. Good. So, yes, as Katie mentioned, I'm a producer who works in television, but I also do new media stuff as well. Actually, I was a reporter through the 90s for a small ABC affiliate in Rhode Island called ABC 6 News, where I got to do some environmental reporting, which was fun, super fun sites, the toxic plume at Otis Air Force Base, as well as following different ecology departments at various universities to cover toxic plumes and pollution and how that affects the environment. And those, it's interesting because during that time, I felt very altruistic. I felt that I could go out and get a lot of eyeballs and get the news director and the assignment desk behind me. It was a tough thing to do. So anyway, I got out of news reporting and decided to be a producer, and I've loved it. I haven't looked back. I love reporting as well. But what I'm going to show you sort of dovetails with some of my reporting, which is to say quick turnaround pieces that involve good information and interesting personalities, people that are specialists. And this is a perfect place to be working, NRDC, doing these kind of videos. The Natural Resources Defense Council, if people don't know about NRDC, they are a fantastic environmental nonprofit that attack the environment or attack polluters from the legislative level. And they make a big difference. Anyway, I'll start out with just one video that I think is interesting, and that is to turn people on to the notion that wind power is a good way to go.
Now, wind power is just a phenomenal technology. It is inexhaustible and provides clean, no air pollution, no greenhouse gas pollution, and we, the United States, have an incredible abundance of it.
So, look around at the impact that our current energy system has on our lives. We've had recent oil spill and more terrible oil spills in the past. People have heard about mountaintop removal and how that's devastating rural communities. and of course the mining disasters. I mean, is this the system that we want to power our lives with?
Wind power has gone through incredible technological evolution. Uses stuff right out of Silicon Valley, provides a lot more power than the old turbines, 3, 4, 5 times more power than those old turbines did. But actually moves a lot slower, so it's much safer for wildlife, particularly for birds, and much quieter.
In a lot of places, wind is actually competitive with those dirty old technologies, and over time, wind will beat those technologies in the marketplace.
Fact of the matter is the wind blows most out in really wild places, far away from where the people live. So we're going to have to bring that power from those places to the people, to our urban centers, to our population centers, and that means building transmission. So between the wind turbines themselves and the transmission, we got to be smart, but we got to use this stuff because we're facing a real climate crisis, and wind power is an incredible solution, part of the solution that will really save our planet.
All right. Pause. So this is a targeted, that was just an example of a targeted video that's you know, sent around hopefully to legislators and policymakers to say, hey, this is something that we need to introduce. It's extremely important. So that's a big part of what I do for the internet, as opposed to a television show where I'm just trying to entertain people, and as P.T. Barnum did, just try to bring a lot of people into the tent and get ratings, and you know, hopefully make a good show. With this sort of thing, it's very, very targeted because people, you know, tend to watch a clip like this by themselves in front of the computer, and if they get bored, they're going to, you know, they're going to quickly move on to something else. So you have to be targeted, and hopefully you're able to convey the message. Now, the next video that I'm going to show is extremely targeted. This was extremely targeted. This video occurred directly after the oil spill, and the president of NRDC, Frances Beinecke, went down to the Gulf and just checked it out herself. And she came back and needed a video produced, and I got the call. I went in around 9:30 in the morning, and I had to put this video together quickly, sort of like turning a package for local news in a way, because we had a very important people that were going to watch it. So anyway, I'm going to play this video, and then I'll tell you who those people were.
Hi, I'm Frances Beinecke, president of NRDC. I just returned from a 3-day trip to the Gulf of Mexico, flew out to the site of the drilling disaster, and visited with people all along the coast, oystermen, fishermen, citizen activists. And I want to tell you what I saw on this trip. As you well know, this is a crisis of unknown proportions. Until the spill is controlled, questions of human health threats for those working in the containment and cleanup operation to those living downwind and downcurrent from the spill will remain. We were asked questions of the adequacy of air quality monitoring and whether real-time information was available. The public wants and deserves answers. Oystermen and shrimpers were gravely concerned about the long-term ecological impacts from the oil and from the dispersants on the rich marine and coastal environment that they depend on. Communities barely recovered from Hurricane Katrina have questions about their economic well-being. Will they be adequately compensated for lost revenues, and how long will their industry be closed? From an environmental perspective, the experience with Deepwater Horizon requires serious review of environmental analysis and safety precautions for all offshore operations. Moreover, your proposed moratorium on future leasing until the causes and implications of this spill are fully understood is absolutely critical. Vulnerable marine and coastal environments across America, including Alaska, require this protection. This is a stark reminder that clean energy solutions are necessary now. America needs to be on a path towards a cleaner, more secure, and more efficient energy system for our transportation and power systems. We need your help to move the American Power Act quickly through the Senate. This is an important and critical step towards reaching a clean energy goal. We thank you for all you do.
All right, so can somebody tell me who that was for? Who? The president, yeah. Okay, so I think I gave it away in the screen there. It wasn't just for the president, it was also for Nancy Pelosi as well. So, you know, I was talking to Katie about this. This felt like an episode, it felt like broadcast news, you know, when they're trying to get the package down to the control room so they can get it on the air. And, you know, she's running along and, you know, hitting the file cabinet and the water fountain and all that stuff. The same thing happened. It was, you know, trying to put this thing together. Cindy Horn was the videographer on this, and her husband is Alan Horn, who was the president of Warner Brothers for many years, up until just a few months ago, actually. And she filmed that, and she's not an expert, she's not a professional, but she did, I think did a very good job. But the bottom line is we got the video to Obama and Pelosi, and the next day he came out swinging. Now, whether or not he saw the video and responded to it, we'll never know. At least I don't know. So it'll be a conversation that I'll have if I ever meet him.
Was that act passed?
Excuse me?
Was that American Power Act?
Got tabled. Anyway, that's a whole other issue. But the NRDC is certainly working on that.
We need more videos.
Right. So and all this stuff that she's talking about is still a work in progress. So and they're working hard. Now the last video is just a short video, and I love it because it's all about smart growth, and it's sort of, you learn so much when you're working on these projects. Smart growth is a great way to build in both existing communities and new communities, and making them a lot more environmentally friendly. And this was just trying to get it down to a very quick thought. So let's look at this one.
It's about designing communities that are more vibrant,
that has homes, that has apartments, that has shops.
mixed use, compact, walkable.
Hope it has some trees, hope it has some green space.
Where people have more transportation choices, and where our daily needs and amenities, like our schools, our jobs, our restaurants, and our shops, are located close to where we live.
It also helps conserve land, so it works for the planet at the same time.
Yeah.
All right, so with that, I'll...
Wind power is just a phenomenal technology.
What happened there? Went back. Okay. All right. Well, with that, I'll let you come back up, and I'll talk more. Yeah.
Wow, those are very cool videos. Thank you so much for sharing those with us. I think that all the green websites, the environmental group websites, as well as the GRIS and the tree huggers, are starting to incorporate video more and more into their offering. And blogs and video are becoming almost more important than the text and pictures that used to dominate. And so the more we can learn about how to produce short videos like this on a short turnaround for websites is, it's going to be important for all of us. And when we're doing our discussion afterwards, Chris, I'd like to know more about what lengths work, the short and the long lengths, which ones have been more effective in your experience. I think there's probably some people in the room who know how to produce a 30 or a 60-second video really fast and get it on the web, and there's probably need for that. So we'll have to figure out how to connect them. Okay, our third panelist is a digital artist. Jon Cohrs is joining us from the digital art frontier. He's also a filmmaker and a theorist, and he works at the intersection of art, technology, and the environment. He has a number of really interesting projects, very out there projects whose connection to the green world is ever changing and not necessarily obvious to all of us, but he's going to explain that to us. Jon is currently a professor at Parsons, which is part of the New School, and he's a technological manager to iBeam, which is a very cool space downtown where we've had some PGA events, actually. He's done some work with the Guggenheim Museum, but mostly he's a very independent digital artist. I'm so glad you're here. Please come on up, Jon.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about a couple of my projects, the ones that kind of are in the environmental vein. I do a bunch of different work. Some of it's related to sonic weapons and TV. But I'm going to talk about stuff that, I guess my interest is in how to make something that we all know about, environmental issues, actually something that is engaging again. Like something that we've all known about, but over time we just get sick of the message. And so I'm trying to come up with ways to kind of revoice those messages. So here's my website, splintless.com, and I also run a blog, which is below. So a lot of what I've spent thinking about is how to redefine wilderness. And this kind of comes from this perspective of, we've done a lot of damage and we've expanded throughout the world. And so in order to envision coexistence, I feel like we have to redefine what those terms mean. And so you'll see a thread with all the projects related to that. But that can happen on a very simplistic level. And so you'll see with this, I start very digitally, and then in the end, I end up on a canoe. But this is a little application that you're all welcome to download from my website. And basically, all it does is it plants a whole bunch of seeds in your computer, these little icons over there. And all those seeds represent pioneer species. So like when a glacier retreats or when there's been a toxic spill and plants slowly regenerate, these are the first ones to come. So when you hit the button plant seeds, well, let's see. So when you hit the button plant seeds, it plants seeds on the order of 20 to 30,000 throughout your computer. Basically, all of those seeds in every single directory on your computer. It's just like a little simple Linux command. And when you hit water seeds, it basically opens up all those seed files. And you can imagine when you open up 20 or 30,000 seeds, it eventually takes your computer to the brink. So it's also this test of how much have we invested in our trust of our computers? Is this something that we can let go of? Are we too dependent on what we have, or are we willing to let it go? But if you reboot, you can bring it back, hopefully. And then I started looking at cities as wildernesses. And this is a project I did a couple years ago where we took a map that the EPA put out of all the different toxic sites in Brooklyn. And we started in Red Hook and then used the map as a way of Superfund sites and toxic sites to guide our way all the way up to Greenpoint. When you go in the wilderness, you use a map to avoid crevasses and other things. And so we just use this map to avoid toxic problems. And that's the route we ended up taking. It ended up being much easier to walk along the shore to get through private and public property and so forth. And here's a little bit of footage. You'll see it's changed a lot in the last couple of years. The spot that we camped out at is totally not existent anymore. So this was a little bit of a film, and it was kind of the first of a series of films that I worked on that are kind of related on this. There you can see our camp spot. There's a bit about the blog, but I won't really talk about that because that's a little bit of a tangent. But it basically just documents these weird situations that evolve where those two, wilderness and society, collide. So one of the problems with a green movement and new media and the whole discussion around it is vocabulary. And there's always this hijacking that's happening between industry and in various movements. And so I've tried to take that language into account and play with character roles and to develop different ways of addressing that. And with this project, I was looking at the Greenpoint oil spill. Now, this is not an oil spill that everybody in the whole country knows about, but everyone in New York, for the most part, has heard of the Greenpoint oil spill that's been going on underneath there since the 60s. And so basically all I did was take an oil sensor, a little bit of technology, and a metal detector, and then created a get-rich device.
California Gold Rush, 1848 to 1852. By May, the word had gotten out.
And so with a lot of my projects, I combine a whole series of ways of addressing the issue. So this is a promotional video. This came with a bunch of tours,
150 years later,
and then a website, so we can do a whole bunch of viral viral promotion to get a discussion online, which is the easiest way to get a large audience.
these industrial areas. By repossessing abandoned chemicals, one can resell them back into the market. And that's where the urban prospector comes into play. Over the next 5 minutes, we're going to cover how this revolutionary device can make you rich.
So here we are with the urban prospector. This is a simple device that has a combustible gas sensor at the front and is housed in a metal detector. And what it does is it can monitor for different changes in gas levels. So with this device, we can begin combing industrial areas, abandoned sites, starting to pick up. We had a nice little spot right here. There's something located right there.
This tool can help find oil, and Greenpoint is the source of the largest oil spill in the United States.
Which is no longer the case. This kind of dates this project.
The Exxon Valdez spill, and the great thing about it is that it's underground, so it's hard to find.
Yo, and this thing was mad cheap, but it found me mad money. Mad money. It's a piece of cake. What you do is just go around. It's like a broom. It's like a dog. It's like you're walking a dog, and then you just find oil. It's like magic.
No one knows how big the oil spill is. With this device, I plan to find out.
So it enables me to build characters and kind of use low production values to kind of suggest these different characters and so forth. And then obviously create a level of humor which lowers people's expectations, and you can actually then have a serious conversation once people start to laugh, which is something that I find really important in most of my projects.
And with that, we can then go in later and either dig it up, and sell it to the black market, or figure out who deposited there and sue the pants off them. With this kind of device, there's a lot of money that can be had, particularly in these abandoned.
All right, so I'll move on. So this is a project I worked on with a water researcher from UC Berkeley who actually worked for NRDC for 5 or 6 years. In this project, we were both really interested. She's really interested in water issues, and I was interested in pharmaceuticals and what happens when those leave our bodies. And this is an article from National Geographic which shows what percentage of these medications end up in our water supply. And this is a really simple graphic that does an excellent job of just showing that this is problematic. And there's some statistics that show what's really going on. So we took this information and wanted to make a project. This is like a notoriously unsexy issue, like pharmaceuticals and water. It couldn't be more boringer. But so what we did is then we developed our own product, which was called Alviso's Medicinal All Salt, which basically we harvested the pharmaceuticals out of the waste treatment water coming from these waste treatment plants, and then marketed it as this kind of organic medicinal cure-all salt, which you can still buy on our website. So this is our web platform, which we sold a lot, not a ton, but some, and then gave tours. And here you can actually see all the drugs that are involved. And this is a report that the NRDC helped put out, as well as the waste treatment plant that we worked with in San Jose. They're the first waste treatment plant to ever publish what comes out. And the problem is that those waste treatment plants are designed to remove our waste, and they use a system very similar to how we digest food, but nobody intended 50 years ago to be dealing with the volume of pharmaceuticals that we're dealing with today. And they just don't have the budgets to then change their system. So this is basically how it works. Drugs, you consume them, then they end up in the toilet, so forth. And then basically we make our own salt evaporation ponds from the water that comes from the waste treatment plant, and that water evaporates, and what you're left with is salt and pharmaceuticals. And here you can kind of see how we go about this. And then, as with the last project, I do tours, and they're kind of a performance, and they're very informational, and it's a really interesting way to engage it directly. And so using all these different tactics to approach an issue creates a sense of validity, but then also creates a much larger audience, obviously. I'll just show a little bit of this. This went with the exhibition that
Alviso's medicinal all salt combines all of our most
that went with the project.
In one simple remedy. It's the multivitamin of pharmaceuticals, hand-harvested from the South San Francisco Bay and sun-dried for purity. All salt is a low-dosage treatment for all of today's ailments. A large percentage of pharmaceuticals that leave our body end up right back into our water supply. Pharmaceuticals are particularly concentrated outside water treatment plants where they lack the ability to remove them from the waste. Clean yet medicated wastewater, once it is released from the water treatment plant, mixes with the ocean salt waters of the lower San Francisco Bay, and this is where we collect the water to produce our natural, cure-all sea salt. We don't use any chemicals or industrial process in our production. Everything is hand-harvested and sun-dried from local salt ponds.
Which is all true.
The pharmaceuticals and all salt are found naturally in water. We simply capture and distill them in the form of an enriched sea salt. If you're looking for a simple modern cure with a salty taste, try our hand-harvested Alviso medicinal all salt.
Oh, you get the idea. Thanks. So I also began looking at the structure of landscape and how that dictates how we move around space and so forth. And I ended up working on a project this summer in Belgium called Remarshing. And I've gotten kind of interested in wetlands because they bounce back really fast, and they have become an area that people are continually trying to exploit. You'll see it in my next project, so I'm just going to go over this project really fast. But basically, here, I'll show you the video and I'll talk about it. But basically what we created, given that this was Belgium was all wetlands 500 or 600 years ago, and so we basically took found wood and built a windmill that powered a water mill that pulled water from the canals and dumped it back on the land. And because it's wind-powered, it's never going to stop. And so eventually the wetlands are going to come back because we're going to be flooding the land. And then we planted a garden right there that is made up of various plants from the area that specifically target the heavy metals and minerals that have been deposited in that area from the industry over the last 300 years, specifically from the 1800s. So you give it a couple of years and the wetlands will slowly grow back. And this is a diagram of all the canals. This is in Ghent, which is a really beautiful town in Belgium. But these are all the factories that have been there over the last 300 years. A lot has changed. And these are the plants that we then found from different areas around there and then planted a garden. Each one has its own specific property to remove metals. So basically all this is sourced from pallets. So the final project is a project that's ongoing, and it deals with artificial flavoring. And in New Jersey, specifically the New Jersey Meadowlands has the highest concentration of artificial flavoring factories in the world. And so we started this project called the Spice Trade Expedition, which was to visit all those factories by canoe. The New Jersey Meadowlands are obviously wetlands, and it's this fascinating area. And on one level, it's this kind of post-industrial wetland that has gone through a lot of transition and is slowly coming back. So it seemed ideal as a backdrop for what we were going to explore in terms of how we view nature. And I'm sure I've run over, so I'm just going to go ahead and jump in the video. And oh, this is kind of interesting, given that this same week a year ago when we invited 12 people to join us on our expedition up to an abandoned dump the day after Thanksgiving, and we had our own Thanksgiving feast of all locally sourced foods from the area, kind of looking at the idea of what is like a locavore, basically. But obviously, you can pull some things out there. That scotch is not made in New Jersey.
I always thought that there was a clear line between what was natural and man-made. In 2002, I moved to Alaska to kayak and live off the grid. I was as close to nature as possible until a tree fell on me. It was easy to paddle into the wilderness, but it took a U.S. Coast Guard rescue team, a helicopter, an ocean-going vessel, countless gallons of oil, and a National Geographic film crew, capitalizing on my misfortune to get out. When I moved to New York City, wilderness always seemed off in the distance. And at the grocery store, the closer I looked, the less I could tell what was real.
We have solved the mystery of the strange maple sugar-like odor that has been wafting through parts of our city during the past few years.
They drew up maps pinpointing where people were smelling the syrup, looked at wind conditions, and narrowed it down to just a few facilities.
And 3 of them happen to be involved in producing food additives and fragrances.
It's done here inside Fruiterov, and officials now maintain the North Bergen facility is the source of the smell that stumped the city.
In the 1600s, Marco Polo set out to collect flavors from around the world.
Which is incorrect. It was the 1100s.
400 years later, most of our flavors are made in New Jersey. So here's Manhattan and Brooklyn, and we are coming down the Hackensack, which is just 4 miles west. Starting in suburban New Jersey, Ryan Van Loot and I paddled south completely unnoticed. From our canoe, it was hard to tell where the man-made world ended and the natural began. What fragrance? You do spearmint, right? We're doing a canoe trip down the Hackensack. We've been visiting all the various flavoring companies, and we wanted to visit IFF.
Get in your canoe and go back up the river, okay? If that's going to cause a problem with you, I'll get the police down here. It can be easy, it can be hard.
For the last century, the Meadowlands' fragile ecosystem has been the dumping ground for locals and manufacturing.
we camped out on an abandoned dump. And in the morning, we noticed that the garbage is growing into a new wilderness. Perhaps it made perfect sense that flavors from such a landscape would blur the line between the artificial and natural.
So this is an ongoing project that it'll probably be another year before it's finished, but yeah, that's a bit of a trailer. So thanks a lot.
This is great, John. Thank you.
Yeah.
Why don't you guys come on up and sit over here? John, why don't you grab the far seat there?
Okay, I'm gonna grab my new.
Okay, great. Somebody's notepad is already up here. Hey, Cindy, I'm going to go straight to Q&A because those presentations were amazing. And I was very excited to hear what everybody's doing. And I don't know, how many people in the audience are actually new media producers or studying to be new media producers? Okay, so there's a few. Did anybody see anything up here that they hadn't seen before? I hope. Yes, good, excellent. I certainly did. I mean, my range of questions for you guys was going to be pretty, you know, new media standard, you know, lengths and effectiveness. But I think we should go right to the audience here. Are there any questions out here in the audience? Yes, right there.
Vitamins and drugs. How much did you charge for it?
Well, it's supposed to be kind of a high-end commodity, so they were $65. I'll give you a discount if you're interested.
How were the sales?
Yeah. Pretty good. We sold 15.
That's pretty good. Raise your hands if there's additional questions. I'm going to jump right into a couple of questions that I had just from the presentations. I'm going to go back to Matt Rosenberg. What was the number in your presentation of the number of millions of data centers that currently exist in the U.S.?
Actually, that number was from 2005, and that was almost 10 million data centers. Now, that includes small data centers. So small companies have their own data centers. Obviously, Google has data centers, and everyone's, you know, what they're used to, Facebook, Twitter, so forth. So,
what's the average size of a data center? Like how many?
That number's really not believe it or not, they're really secretive about data centers. Like I said, Twitter, you can't find anything on the internet that Twitter actually says where they actually exist in terms of a data center, not their offices are in San Francisco. So that's true of everyone. Basically, for security reasons, they don't really talk about it.
Well, then let me just ask a much more direct question. For the new media producers who are here or people related to the new media production field, what can they do to reduce their carbon footprint? Can they find, do they need to be looking for green hosting? What do they need?
Well, I mean, it depends how seriously they want it. It's really just it's a decision they have to make that's based on many factors. It can be cost. It can be how green do they really want to be. I mean, you can make an argument that Google, as a cloud service, is very green. It's very efficient. They do buy carbon offsets. They also have invested enormous amounts in offshore wind power that they're going to be building. It's in their interest to become a power company because they use a lot of power. So you can certainly make a good argument to just go with the Google Apps, which is hosted Google, which a lot of my clients use. But if you want to take it one step further and you feel like, and you really don't want to participate in that, which some people don't, and some people are sort of eerie of Google in general, think it's very big brother, then there's some of the hosting providers that I named, that one in California, which is really off the grid and completely, they're smaller, but for most small productions, even bigger productions, those are well big enough to do whatever you want.
Mm-hmm. And then there's Black Cat hosting.
Yeah, well,
which I personally like.
Thank you.
So let me ask you something, Chris. We saw wind power, we saw the oil spill, we saw smart growth, and I know you've done more videos than that. What, in the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned the Superfund sites and the toxic plumes from your early reporting days. I mean, what can a new media producer who's got an environmental passion, what is the best thing for them to do right away? Should they grab a video camera and make one of these short videos, or is there something else, another way to approach it?
You could do that. It depends on how passionate you are. I think that there's a thirst out there. People want to know about what's going on in the environment, and we hear, the horrible stories about global warming and climate change and everything else, and it galvanizes people and makes them very passionate. And if you want to just grab a camera and run out and start your own website, and you've got a lot of passion and drive, do it. Another way of approaching it is to find other people that share in your passion. And in my case, I found the folks over at NRDC, and it's a good match because they're smart and they can convey a lot of good information, and hopefully I can put it out there. But there's a lot of different places to go other than NRDC, and at universities and just passionate people in general. So I would say, if you've got that fire in your heart, go and grab a camera and go do it. You need to learn how to edit, and you need to learn how to, ask questions, and you can also do other forms of new media to get that information across, and I think that you established that point, Jon, extremely effectively.
Thank you. So, Jon, is it enough to go viral and to use all these tactics to get the discussion going? My question actually is going to be pointed to you. Your projects are so interesting and fun to watch. Which one of those do you think has had possibly the most impact in terms of raising awareness?
That's probably the salt one, because it ended up on a lot of different blogs, and you can actually then see how people are digesting it with the comments, and the comments will actually have a thread. And that's always kind of been, for me, the best gauge of a project, is how long does that thread keep going, and how angry or how persistent are people. And you got to have both sides of that fence to have a good discussion. If everyone just says, oh, that's great, you're still where you started. So I presented that project also in a couple other places. There's a website called Instructables, which just basically tells you how to make things. So I told people how to make this salt. And of course, a whole bunch of people were horrified because they were worried that their kids would make this salt, and that then creates a whole new dialogue about this, which is then interesting because if my kid can make this salt and I'm angry about that, this is my water supply. So.
That's really good. Your current project, what do you think is going to be the environmental takeaway from that?
I think it's going to be a lot subtler. It's mostly going to be about how I feel like we're slowly losing our connection to the natural world. And I think food was kind of one of those last areas, and even food is now confusing. So that's kind of more the direction that's going, and less like a concrete message.
That's so true. Actually, Matt, you've used the web a lot for food-related messaging. Can you talk about how well that's worked?
Yeah, I also help other people with their messaging on the web who are in the food business. It's worked pretty well, actually. It's been pretty effective. I work with my wife, actually. We do a bunch of projects together, like Eating Liberally, you mentioned, and Retrovore, which is, our slogan is, the future is in the pasture. And we found, one of the most effective things that I did was actually just teaching Marion Nessel how to tweet. And it was a battle, actually, because she's, for people who are not familiar with her, she's probably one of the most prominent nutritionists. If you turn on CNN or NPR, you'll always see her commenting on food. And she just totally said she would never tweet. And I said, well, we'll make your blog tweet automatically. And she wasn't paying attention. And then one day she called and said, what is Twitter? I have to know because the San Francisco Chronicle just said I'm tweeting. And then now, in less than 2 years, she was listed in Time Magazine's 100 most important Twitters to follow. And she's now something like 80,000 or 90,000 followers. So that was effective, but it was just teaching someone how to do something who really had a voice that needed to be sent out.
That's great. And speaking of teaching people how to do something, Chris, my exposure to new media started when Discovery Channel trained me to, build the website and the supporting interactive elements for a series that we were doing for them on an environmental subject. But you've been in with those networks off and on for the last several years, Discovery, TLC, A&E. Are they growing their new media presence, and are you finding that that's working in support of the shows that you do for them?
Honestly, Katie, I can't answer that.
Really?
I just don't. I mean, when I'm working for the networks, I'm working on a project specifically and not worrying so much about what the network is doing and worrying about my project and getting all my elements together and then putting the show together.
You should definitely do new media elements for the Erin Brockovich show. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing with that?
Sure, absolutely. This is a show called Real Crimes and Real Stories. It's brand new for Discovery ID. And they're taking movies that involve murder and investigation and doing the real story behind them. And so Selena, Monster, To Die For, Donnie Brasco. Actually, I'm producing 2 of the 6 movies, and I've just completed interviewing for the Donnie Brasco, which is like, forget about it, hey, I'm going to whack you, that kind of thing. And now I'm working on Erin Brockovich's project, which is a lot different and very exciting for me because it obviously dovetails with things that I'm extremely interested in. And in this case, it's contamination of groundwater, which is just, I think that's come up a lot tonight. Yeah. So anyway, it's interesting to be doing a show that's all about suspense and crime and investigation that dovetails with my passion. And so sometimes you land on a project like that, and it's fun to do. And also Erin is the host of the show, so she's going to be fun to work with.
You should definitely get some stuff up there that allows people to, sign up their dirty water stories from their local towns and expand that map.
By the way, that's just quickly on what Erin's doing. I've obviously been researching this, and she has been doing it a lot since '96 or since '91, and now she has. If you go to erinbrockovich.com, you can see all of the different sites that she's found around the country that have toxic plumes, and she's going after them and trying to clean them up in various ways. But it's startling.
Oh my goodness! I hope there's nobody out there with a toxic plume in their yard. But if there is, see Chris after the show. I have one more question for each of these guys, but I just wanted to check and see. Are there questions out here? Yes.
It's for Matt. I've been trying to work with the cloud services this year, and I find that uploading up to the internet is very slow, painful, even with a Time Warner fastest cable connection. And compared to downloading is really fast. Can you talk about the limitations and if uploading is going to be easier in the coming years?
Yeah, what you're describing is what is called asynchronous communications, and what it means is downloading is much faster than uploading. It's not the same speed, because most people basically, except if you're producing a movie and you want to upload a video, most people in the past anyway were really concerned with download speed because they couldn't watch a video fast enough, so they focused all their attention on increasing that speed. Having said that, there are some, they're more expensive. Time Warner does offer faster broadband now, which is, not synchronous, but it gives you like 5 megabyte upload. And then what's kind of exciting is if you do have FiOS, FiOS is incredibly fast upload. I mean, it's like what you would have a server on.
But I try to upload like a 30-minute TV episode, and so that's like approximately 30 gigabyte. So like 5 meg versus 1 gigabyte.
That's the fastest Time Warner has for residential. Actually, the FiOS will do up to like 45 or 50 megabytes, which is much more viable. But you're right, 30 gigabytes right now is going to be painful. But I would just say that in that case, you really need to look into FiOS.
Somebody's doing it. Look at YouTube. It's full of 30-minute cribbed shows.
Right. It's true.
You got to go to Kazakhstan. Actually, what's the carbon cost of uploading a 30-megabyte show?
Well, I mean, the thing I didn't mention, actually, because I was trying to do that as fast as I could, for example, there's all these auxiliary costs. So, for example, the carbon footprint of that tweet that I was showing you, that was a raw tweet or an unadulterated tweet. As soon as you attach a picture to a tweet and you're using another whole actually set of servers that aren't even part of Twitter, you're then hosting your image somewhere else. You may have doubled or tripled that carbon footprint. So, and that, there's all different ways that Twitter would be enhanced in terms, well, you add many things onto it. But in getting to your question, it's really hard to determine that carbon footprint, but you obviously have the carbon footprint of your computer on for that time period, which might actually be using maybe more power because the drive is spinning more while it's uploading the video. You have the cost of the data center at Time Warner, and if there's an increased there's increased, I mean, basically it's all over the place. No one really has calculated, in calculating the cost of tweet, that's the only person in the world who's ever done it, that one engineer at Twitter. So there just aren't that many people working on that.
Wow. Well, we have at thegreenproductionguide.com, you can do the carbon calculation on a film or a TV show, but we need one for, these new media elements. So
there's just so many factors. And also there's the intrinsic cost of the production of the actual computer itself, and how long is that computer going to last? And that's another whole issue as to how much that...
Talk to Fourth Bin. Right. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I've got a question related to the SALT project.
Yeah.
And that would be this. Oh, thank you. There was an article in this weekend's New York Times magazine about fracking in Amwell Township near Pittsburgh. I don't know if you read it or not, but a lot of consequences are happening as a result of this, one of which was that people's pipes and other household conveyances of water were being eaten away by salts, amongst other chemicals that are being used by the companies that are doing the fracking. Of course, they want to keep secret the chemicals they're using because it's like McDonald's special sauce. But by the same token, they're able to say, well, the toluene and benzene that's being found in the bloodstream of and in the urine of these children that are living nearby where this fracking ponds are being amassed is not their responsibility. It might be something that's in the groundwater. Anyway, so if you had some sort of salt project that was being done there and being done with the waters that were being used in these ponds that they keep where the water is returned from shooting it into the Marcellus Shale, then it might force the hand of these firms that are using these chemicals and saying, well, here's what's in the salt. Just a suggestion, but it seems like a good project to expand the salt project.
John, you want to take that on?
I haven't read the article, but I'm definitely familiar with what's going on in fracking. Yeah, that's a whole other can of worms. And the problem with that is getting somebody to pay to analyze that. We were really lucky in that particular waste treatment plant they were working with had released a report. Most waste treatment plants won't, and there's a reason why those fracking companies won't release that information either. And it would cost between $8,000 and $10,000 per element to test for, and I'm assuming there's probably 50 to 100 things in the fracking.
If you were to do it and call it frack salt and people were buying it,
yeah, right.
They would have to step in because there's well, geez, it's a part of the product.
That's a good idea. Or you could go to Chris Perera and ask the NRDC for the money to do the analysis.
Yeah, we tried to get them to help us with the salt.
I actually did a video. I've done something. It jogs my memory because you do so many videos, you forget about things you worked on. I did something with Mark Ruffalo, and he referred to his fracking as frickin' fracking. And he was not happy with it, obviously, because he lives upstate New York, exactly where it's happening. So,
yeah. All right. Yes. Oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi.
You go ahead.
I have actually two questions. I like all three presentations. I think that they're really great. And I have a question for Matt, which you kind of made at the beginning, but I'm thinking like more on an everyday basis. I just realized like how much energy we waste every day, like using internet. And is there anything that we can do on an everyday basis besides like, I don't know, deleting our emails, like anything else that you can suggest? And then the second question is for Chris. I know that it's the field that you are interested in, but you're not like, but did you hear anything about wind energy and how they're going to change this, like, because there's like a lot of noise pollution with like with all these windmills and that kind of stuff. Like, is there anything coming up with those kind of problems? So those are my two questions.
Matt?
Okay, I don't know if I can go first. It's really hard. I mean, you know, you don't want to deprive yourself of all the social media that you probably may be using, and how much difference that'll make is really hard to decide. All of the obvious things that one should do, you know, unplugging their power supply, the basic things that they do at home, because you really can't have too much of an effect on data centers and how you use them, because as I mentioned, even deleting your mail doesn't really matter because they have to retain it forever anyway, basically. So it's, you know, basically being mindful and keeping in mind that, you know, the internet has its benefits in terms of energy that you're not using because of it. So there's a term now called dematerialization, which you can think about when you're using, let's say you had an iPhone and you had a car and you're not using a GPS that you bought from Garmin, but you're using the iPhone as that device. You may be using the iPhone for 10 devices. You might have had other devices to do, so there's that many less materials being produced that you're replacing with one. So there are advantages that you can look at too, so you shouldn't always look at the negative side of it.
Thanks, Matt.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Well, just quickly to answer your question about the windmills. In that video you just saw, they're coming up with new technology that slows the speeds down, which makes them a lot more quiet and also prevents bird strikes. Because, you know, when they're going so fast before, a flock of birds would go through and it wasn't always a pretty picture. So the technology has improved a lot.
Good answer. Yes, John.
Just real quickly, are all these solid-state drives reducing consumption?
Interesting question. Solid-state drives, first off, they haven't been adopted. I didn't bring it up because it was getting to the minutia, but it's good you brought it up. You may notice that if you buy a MacBook Air, for example, now, that you don't have a moving drive. It's called an SSD drive, solid-state drive. Data centers haven't adopted this yet. They technically do use less power, but we don't really know how long they last. That's one issue, which some people actually say they could last 50 times longer than a regular hard drive, but we haven't had them long enough to know. And there's other tests that show that they could last no longer because of the number of times you write to the medium. Even though it's not a moving part, it actually can wear out in some form. So, and they're just too expensive now for data centers to adopt. There is one data center, I should say, that brags about the fact that there are all solid-state disk drives, but it's hard to say whether that means anything.
So we should watch that space. Thank you. I think we have time for one last question.
Yeah, this is for John. I really enjoyed the combination of irony and history in your videos and inventiveness. I just want to know, when you mentioned it went viral, does it start from your blog, or how do you get your audience?
I usually have to reach out to it, and then because I've been doing this for a couple of years, there's certain people that are interested, and I'll go to them first, and they are usually affiliated with a blog, and then it starts a cascading effect if the project's interesting enough. Obviously, it has to be interesting first.
So it's not your blog; it's other affiliate blogs.
Yeah. Not that many people follow my blog.
But it's a good question. How do you two reach your audience? How do you reach your audience? How does NRDC reach their audience?
Well, you mentioned Switchboard. And you have to imagine that these sites are huge. There's a lot of information going on, and there's fracking, and there's wind, and there's the Alaskan Refuge, and there's what is it, the acidity level in the oceans, and it goes on and on and on. And each one of these studies, you might have an associated blog or an associated video. So you have to, again, I think the big message of what I've learned working on these videos is that they have to be very targeted, and that you have to really think about the message that you're trying to convey. It's totally different from producing a television show where I get not an hour but 42 minutes to put it together, and it's with a team, and we tend to have a much bigger budget, and we can add graphics and you know, do different things. With this type of stuff, it's a lot more guerrilla like, and I think you have to be very targeted. You have to, and you're putting people on air, or in this case on the internet, that might not have spent a lot of time in front of a camera. So you also have to help them kind of get to where their message is crystallized. And that's part of the producing. And I think that's where I think the fun is. I think it's fun to produce people, and they get it, and nobody wants to spout on for a long time. They want to get their message across and be effective. And when it's as important as trying to save the environment, you know, why not really work on that and sharpen your needle? So from my perspective, I think that, again, this stuff is very targeted, and, you know, I'm, you know, very proud to be sandwiched by these two very smart gentlemen and on this panel, because I think it's been a very informative talk tonight.
Well, that's great. Thank you. Thank you so much. I think we're out of time, but thanks to the panelists, Matt, Chris, and Jon, you did a great job. Thanks so much.